Everyone, players, Sam. Welcome to part 2 of our Aoshima 124th Lamborghini Aventador build. So, in the first part, we concentrate on the body. We got all that cleaned up, assembled, primed, painted, and 2K cleared. This part, we're going to concentrate on the engine, the steering, suspension, etc., and the wheels and tyres. We're going to get all those on and assembled. In part 3, remember to get all the interior done, and then in part 4, we'll assemble or get that body sanded, polished, all the body panels on, and hopefully finish off. Remember to be a 4-part build of around 30 to 40 minute videos, and it's a lovely kit. It's going together really well, and I'm quite looking forward to getting this engine together. This engine's really nice on these kits, and it does look good once assembled. So today you're going to see the custom airbrush in use from Mr. Hobby, the JX nippers, and the Mr. Hobby sprue cutters are all going to be put through their paces today as well. Various other tools will be used. We're going to use all sorts of different paints from different primers, different colours, metallizers, all sorts of stuff. So as we go, I'll try and explain it as good as I can and my reasons for using them, and hopefully we'll stick with it and get through it. Right, so let's crack on with the build and get started. Okay, so we're back at it. Let's have a quick look at the instructions what we're going to be doing today. So we've got all the brakes, suspension, all the running gear to assemble. We're going to get the wheels on as well. We've got all this engine to assemble as well, which is a very nice part of the kit. There's lots of different components to this. It's going to be a bit difficult to spray and what have you, but we'll get through it, and then we'll move on to the interior in part 3. So we've got lots of fiddly bits to paint and clean up, and we're going to get started and start cleaning up the engine. Okay, so we've got the Mr. GX cutters, the nippers. First time I've properly used them, so we're going to get a lot of use now, clean all these parts up. Now these are single edge cutters, so one edge is flat, there's no blade on one side, and the other edge is the cutting edge. And this is supposed to give a cleaner cut, and from what I've seen so far, it gives a nice clean cut as well. Now obviously, when you're used to using a tool and you change, it takes a lot of getting used to. I use the Tamiya cutters normally. I've been using those for over 2 years, so a change is something you use daily. It does feel a bit alien. These are a little bit larger in the hand. I've got massive hands, so they feel nice and comfortable. They're nice and sharp. They're cutting through the sprues, no problem at all. And like I say, it's just going to take a little bit of getting used to. But we're making short work of these parts, as you can see. Not a lot of pressure needed to remove the parts from the sprue, and they look to be a high quality tool. Like I say, I'll do a full review of these at a later date. So that's some of the engine components off. We're just going to clean them up a little bit closer. So I never cut fully up to the part. I always leave a little bit of sprue behind, and then I go back and trim it as close as I can on each part, work my way around, and then we'll come in and sand the rest of the plastic off. That saves any damage and make sure we are cutting off the correct parts. So we've got a 400 grit thinny stick from UMP, a UMP buffer, and a UMP thinny buffer as well. So we're going to use a 400 grit thinny stick. That's my favourite thinny stick of them all. We're going to remove all the plastic parts that are protruding that shouldn't be there, left behind from the sprue points. So it's going to take our time. There's no real pressure being added. We're letting the sander do its job and just slowly sanding away. It's a 400 grit. This one's pretty well used as well, so it's not as abrasive as it was when it's new, and that's just how I like them. We've got our buffer. So this is the abrasive side of the buffer. We'll then flip it round and give it a polish, and that will get us back to nice, clean plastic. Now we're coming in with our 220 thinny sponge on these curved parts. So with being a sponge, it can form to the shape and it won't flat it. And we're just taking care of some of the awkward seams that are in and around this part. So as you can see, no real pressure being applied. Just let the tool do the work and systematically work your way around until you're happy all the parts are gone. Now, like I said, there's a lot of parts to clean up, so I am skipping through them as we go. I'm just showing some of the more important parts or that use different tools or techniques as we go. The rest of the parts are being cleaned up as we go. So once we're happy that everything's cleaned up with the sponge, we can come with the buffer again, give it a buff up and get it back to nice clean plastic. So on the suspension part at the rear, there is a locator point, ejection pin mark kind of point on it. So what we're going to do, we're going to use our knife to cut that away. So on an angle, we're cutting it away. I think we did this on the Subaru build. We're going to go back and have a look. So we're just chopping it away. Basically, it's on one of the coils of the spring. There's an ejector point. and it leaves a circular mark in amongst the spring. So we're cutting it away on an angle, which leaves behind the spring. I'm just going to scrape it away, and then we can come in with a file and a sander and sand away the excess material, leaving behind hopefully what should look like a perfectly formed spring. So we've got a Suji Burrito file now. This is the half flat one, half moon one. And we've just got an angle and we're giving it a little bit of pressure, not a lot again. The files are very high quality, they do remove material very easily, so just take your time in using them. And once we're happy that's done, we can come in again with our buffer and clean it all up. Once all the parts have been cleaned up, I use my trusty toothbrush to clean up any dust or residue that's left behind. And this will give us a clean finish as when we come to prime. So we're going to assemble the engine, so we're just going to offer up the parts together, making sure they fit. There are some parts still to remove, but I like to glue them together, give them a little bit of a clamp, and then sand them when we're done. So we've got some we've got some Tamiya Extra Thin with a little bit of plastic weld in. So a little bit of hotter glue mixed in between. It's a 50-50 mix. It's a great little tip from my buddy Norman. Fully useful information, Norman is. And what it does, it makes the Tamiya Extra Thin a little bit hotter, but still slows it down a little bit. It's like the perfect glue I found. It's literally a 50-50 mix of any of the hotter glues like mech or plastic weld, etc. And I just mix it 50-50. Tip Norman gave me, and it works absolutely fantastic. I found it immensely useful on things like fairings and seams, where you can literally put the glue in, give it a little squeeze, and the molten plastic fills the seam, you sand it, and it's almost job done in one shot. You've got to be careful don't get your fingers. If you do, give your fingers a rub. And like I say, once you're happy you've got glue in all the right places, give it all a tight little squeeze. And trust me, you'll be amazed at how well it works. It's a really good tip. So there we go. Once all the parts are all cleaned up and anything glued together, we're going to section them apart for what needs spraying different colours. So what I've got here, I've got a lollipop stick. I buy these by the 100. We've got some masking tape turned over sticky side up, and we're just sticking the parts on. Now you can use white tack on top cocktail sticks. I'm trying different ways lately of mounting parts. I've bought some different clips and what have you, and I found that this way particularly useful for spraying parts. They only need spray on one side and have a flat surface on the other side. So the likes of suspension mount now, I'm going to drill a hole with my little trusty battery powered drill. Now I know a lot of people out there are going to ask, what drill is this? This is no longer available, sadly. It's a very low power micro detailer I got a long time ago in a load of second hand modelling stuff. I think Micromark originally made it. It's battery powered, has no power whatsoever, just enough to drill into styrene, and as you can see, drilled into the bottom of the suspension point. We snip off the top of the cocktail stick, and then it's a nice snug fit, and that gives us a perfect mount for spraying. So like I say, I'll pick and choose which parts are done which way, and we'll assemble them as we go. Now another favourite trick of mine is white tack on a cocktail stick. Any parts where it's a big flat surface or you're not going to see it, pop it inside, put the cocktail stick in, and Bob's your uncle, we're ready for primer. So we're going to use Ultimate Modern Products Grey and Ultimate Modern Products Black primer. Now the primer colour will vary depending on the base colour of what's being sprayed. Generally, if it's metallic, I'll prime in black, and if it's anything else, I'll prime in grey. That's my usual rule of thumb. So we're going to apply several light coats, working our way around all the parts. We're not trying to hose it on in one go as usual. We're just putting light coats on, building it up as we go. There's multiple angles and turns and sections on these parts, and we want to make sure we get even coverage all the way around. Can't really go wrong spraying this stuff. It's almost foolproof. As long as you're a 0.3 or bigger needle at about 25 psi, and you do nice light thin coats, you shouldn't have any issues whatsoever. Obviously make sure your parts are clean. If you had your hands all over them, degrease them. A little bit of UMP airbrush cleaner works wonders. And just keep your parts clean and keep your coats of paint nice and light. So like I said, we're going to do some parts in black, some parts in grey, and the top colour will dictate the primer colour. So there we go, we're on the suspension components now. Now because this is going to be a mixture of silver and what have you, we're going to prime it in grey primer, and then we're going to hit it with semi-gloss black, and then detail paint all our parts. Now I used to prime all my parts that are going to be black in black, primarily for speed, but I'm finding now if I prime it in grey, I get a better coverage with the black because I can see where the black is actually going, whereas when it's primed in black, you can't see it as well. So I kind of switched just recently to priming anything that's going to be black, priming it in grey. So that's the way it goes lately. Again, the grey primer, absolutely fantastic. Nice light thin coats. Two coats, probably 2-3 coats, light coats will do you. By the time you go around all your parts and you come back, those parts will be dry. So we've got some alkali duraluminum. We're going to paint our engine up in this. Now this is alclad, so this is a lacquer based metallic paint. Now I do spray the engine in this colour and then change my mind later on, but we're showing two different types of paint, or makes of paint, so it's good to see. So again, alclad, lower your pressure as much as you can, 12 psi is ideal. Nice light thin coats, you really do need nice thin coats. It dries very quickly in a lacquer, but it doesn't like being oversprayed too much. So again, we're doing all the engine components in this. Now what made me change my mind was I thought this part looked better in the Dura aluminium, and the engine block would look better in a different colour. Gives a slight contrast and helps break up the monotony. Now what I've got here is Mr. Hobby Super Metallic. This is titanium with a hint of gold in. I like my titaniums to have that little hint of gold, and that's what I've done here. I've mixed it ever so slightly. Again, we're a lacquer paint. We're thinned with a little bit of Mr. Hobby leveling thinner. We're about 12 psi again, and we're just doing nice light coats. Again, it's a lacquer, but it does take a little bit longer to dry. But it gives a fantastic finish, it really does. So, like I say, I changed my mind on the colour. So we're going for Mr. Hobby Super Metallic Super Fine Silver. And again, we're just going over the alclad. The alclad's well and truly dry by now. It dries in minutes. And I just think it breaks up the tone a little bit and gives us a little bit of tonal differentiation in the engine. Very nice paints to spray. Like I said, they do seem to take a little bit longer to dry. But they are worth it. The pigments are ultra fine in these paints. And they are very, very nice. A little bit difficult to get. Not everywhere sells them. And they seem to be out of stock quite often. But if you can find them, they're well worth finding. They're beautiful metallic paints. So, we've got some Mr. Servicer Black 1500. I've got some in my little dropper bottle, thinned with a bit 50-50 with some leveling thinner. We've got the Mr. Hobby Custom Airbrush. Beautiful airbrush. This is the equivalent of the Iwata Custom Micron. So it's a 0.8mm needle nozzle. I'm just giving it a blow through with some thinner. We've got our Mr. Servicer paint, and what we're going to do is we're going to paint some of the parts I want black in the Mr. Servicer. Now, I could have primed them in this, but I like to prime with my own primer. Now, the reason I use this is because it's a very nice black colour. I don't tend to use this per se as a primer. I use it as a black. Now, it's not quite satin, it's not quite matte, it's right in between. And I love the colour for engines and components and what have you. Bikes, it's superb on the bikes, it really is. Just purely for its colour. Now, it's a lacquer based primer. As I say, thin 50-50 with Mr. Hobby leveling thinner. And sprayed a 15 psi through the custom Mr. Hobby airbrush. It sprays lovely. Dries very quick. Like I say, there's a very nice satiny matte finish behind. I just like the colour. And that's all I tend to use it for, to be honest. Don't tend to use it as a primer very often. I just like the black. For me, the interest is drawn to the model by the tonal differences. It only has to be slight. And on the likes of suspension components, engines and bikes, it looks fantastic. It really does. So we've got some of the new Tamiya lacquer paintos, or paint it is actually, but the logo looks like an O. Again, thin 50-50 with leveling thinner. It's a lacquer based paint. These are new out. I don't think you can really get them in the UK yet. But I agree with other people, this is by far the best semi-gloss paint I've seen so far. And again, I use a few. We used Tamiya X18 semi-gloss, that gives a nice finish. As does the TS29 and this. And again, tonal differences. They're all different finishes, only very slight. But you can use that to your advantage by adding a bit of visual interest to the model. But for me, this is the ultimate semi-gloss black. It beats them all. I've tried most of them. They miss the colour, everything. The Tamiya is fantastic. So now another tip. We've got We've got Model Air from Vallejo. This is the silver colour. Now I picked this up from another channel, another very talented modeller, and he uses this to brush paint a lot of his metallic parts. Now I've been meaning to try for quite some time. I usually use Citadel. But watching the videos, it seems to cover fantastic. I thought, you know what? Let's give it a whirl. Oh, is it good? Oh, yes. It's very, very good. It covers almost in one coat. It's a very highly pigmented metallic colour, and it looks great. You can see how easy it's going on there. It really is good. It's a beautiful colour and covers really well. So all the suspension A-arms were done. We're then going to do the suspension on the rear suspension spring component we sprayed in the semi-gloss back earlier. So we're just detail painting it. I haven't thinned this at all. This is straight out the bottle, and it just covers absolutely fantastic. It really does. Like I say, for a long time I've been using Citadel Mithril Silver. I've still got old Mithril Silver, and whilst it covers well, it doesn't cover as well as this. So we're just going around some of the parts, picking out some metallic parts of this. Once they're dried, we'll give them a wash. But I am very impressed with this. Go to the Scale Modelling channel, Tom's channel, and have a look at some of his work. He's a very, very talented car builder, and lots of useful tips over there as well. So we've got Tamiya X7. This bottle's been shaken. In the lid, where a little bit of paint collects after you're shaking it, I put a drop of leveling thinner in there. And with that, this brush paint's beautiful. Vallejo Model Colour was my go-to brush paint. Not anymore. For the small parts, I like doing this. That leveling thinner makes a world of difference in there, and really allows the paints to brush really nice. So just straightening up the springs. Once they're done, there you go, they're both done. And allowed to dry for a few hours. We've got some of them Tamiya enamel panel line washers. This is the black, and we're just popping it in between the coils. Again, to give a bit of difference and a bit of look to it, and a bit of depth. And once it's dry, we'll remove the excess, and it should look okay. As you can see, it's all detail painted now. Once this is dry, it's ready to be installed, and not looking bad. Very impressed by that metallic paint, I really am. So glad I tried it. Again, adding a wash to the engine. Lots of little nooks and crannies and what have you on the engine. You're not putting a lot on. If you put it on thin enough, you won't have anything to wipe off. So what I tend to do is, when I get a new bottle, is throw some odourless mineral spirits in the bottle to the neck, give it a shake, and that thins it even more than it should be, and I found the wash absolutely perfect. Again, we've got the grey panel liner wash. There's some hose detail on the top here, ribbed hoses. So what we're going to do, we're going to pop it in, and then when it's all dried, we're going to remove as much as we can, and it'll just leave behind the representation of those hoses. We're not trying to leave the grey behind for the grey, we're just trying to leave it behind so it highlights the hose. Again, this stuff's been thinned, and it's perfect, it really is. And again, we've got some decals now. So we've got a Lamborghini writing that goes on each side of the engine cover. So these just applied like normal decals. Pop them in place. Once you're happy, hit them with the decal solutions and get them set in place. There's also a Lamborghini logo to go on the very front or the rear of the engine as we look at it. And again, some careful positioning. Once you're happy with it, hit it with the decal solutions and let them set in place. So we've masked up our brake discs for our calipers, and we've masked up our engine bay as well. The engine bay has been painted in, that's a good question, what did I paint it in? I think it was alkali duraluminum again. The exhausts are there, they're all painted up as well, and our discs are ready to be painted in the colour we choose. We've got our Mr. Surfacer again. So what we're going to do is, we originally painted the engine bay in Mr. Surfacer black. We've got our Mr. Hobby airbrush again. We then sprayed the metallic, we've masked it, and then we're going to fill in where we sprayed with the metallic. So that's going to give us a nice heat shielded engine bay. So again, nice light thin coat. It is lacquer base, but still take your time. There's no need to hose the paint on. Build it up slowly to get the nice finish we require. Like I say, this Mr. Surfacer gives a fantastic black colour, and it looks like factory plastic from engine bays, which is why I like it so much. It really is a nice colour. So once that's all painted, we put it to one side to dry. We've got some Mr. Colour Reds. This is the Mr. Hobby Mr. Colour Red. Now I did originally paint the calipers in orange. Didn't like the colour at all and changed my mind to red. So this is Mr. Hobby thinned with leveling thinner. This is their red. I think it's C3, is it? I forget the colour now. Again, nice thin coat. It's a lacquer based paint through this lovely Mr. Hobby airbrush. Again, we'll do a full review of this airbrush. It's a very precise tool, it really is. And now we've got some Alcalad Sepia. Now, I'm going to use this. I'm just doing a test spray, write my name. There we go. We're going to use this to put a bit of weathering on our exhaust. So we turn the MAC valve down on the front. This slows the flow of air down a little bit and gives us a little bit more control. It's easier and better to do it on the compressor, to be honest, but when you're just doing a part like this and it doesn't really make all that difference, it's a handy feature to have. So this is lacquer-based semi-transparent finish. It's just a sepia kind of paint. And all we're doing is we're adding the staining to any of the junctions or bends where the heat builds up to give it a bit of heat staining. I have no idea if the real car does this. We're doing it for some interest, that's all. A little bit of artistic license, I guess. Once it's all dried, we'll tie it all in together with a little bit of paint work later on, which I'll show further down the line. But this airbrush is beautiful, really precise, gets right in there where you need it. And like I say, I'll do a full review of it at a later date. As you can see, it's starting to look a bit weathered now. So there you go, it's not just plain colour, it's been broken up with some weathering. So these are our discs. They have been unmasked now. The Mr. Colour Red has fully dried, and we're getting some H28 metallic black from Mr. Hobby Aquis. Another one of my favourite colours. We've got some Mr. Hobby Level and Thinner, and again, a little drop. Bloop. There we go. Mix it together, and again, it just makes the paint super brushable. For large areas, it's not going to be, but for small areas like this is the centre part of the hub. The paint just stays flowing for a long time. It doesn't drag it off. It just totally transforms it. It's a brilliant tip and well worth using. So like I said, we're going to systematically go around and paint all the centre of these hubs. Once that's dry, we can get a bit of a weather with some wash again. But just be careful hand painting. Take your time. We're not getting it all on in one go. We're just lightly applying it where we need it. Like I say, adding a level and thinner to the paint makes a world of difference. I never touch my Vallejo model colours anymore, so much I'm actually thinking of selling them. I just use the Mr. Hobby and the Tamiya paints now, just because this tip transforms and they paint so well. So once happy that's all painted, that can be left to one side to dry. We're painting the handbrake caliper on the rear discs. So this is this is model colour from Vallejo, black. It's probably one of the colours I tend to use a lot because it dries again in a semi-matte finish. Got the caliper decals now. They're a bit tricky to get in place due to the size of them. Again, once I was happy they're in place, they were then set with decal solutions. I think we've got a nice contrast there between the silver of the disc, the dark metal of the hub, the red of the caliper. Once we get a wash on there, it'll bring it alive, and they look really good. So like I say, once you're happy that's in place, hit it with some decal solution, and leave it to one side to dry. And there you go, there's two completed discs, front and rear. They just need a wash now. That will show all the cross-drilled detail in there, and make them come alive. Now, we've got some of the Vallejo Model Air Silver I was using before. I had a little bit left behind. I was using this brush as I went, and I thought, you know what? The brush is nearly dry. Let's do a little bit of dry brushing on the exhaust. So what we're doing now, we're just highlighting a few other parts. So we're going to get the original colour we put on, the titanium colour. Then we're going to get the staining of the sepia alclad, and then the brighter finish of this. And it's just going to give a nice tonal difference to the exhaust as we go. Again, our discs are all dry now. The decal's dry, and we've got some of the Tamiya panel line wash, and we're just going to apply it all over. So there's recesses on the caliper, all around that central hub we painted earlier. And then we can get it all over the disc itself, into all the drilled indentations. And once dry, wipe off the excess, and we have a weathered caliper that will really look the business. Like I say, that red caliper looks good. I'm glad I chose that colour now. The orange did look good, it just wasn't quite as vibrant. And I thought with the grey bodywork of the car, we need something a little bit in your face. So as you can see, what I do is I dip the brush in, wipe off majority of the excess, and then just lightly apply the wash round until we're happy it's all gone. Sorry, not gone, on. There we go, that's left to dry for a few hours. So we're going to glue the exhaust in place. These are going to go in place before the engine's installed, so make sure you get them orientated the correct way. A little bit of CA glue. Again, make sure your parts are fully dry before you start committing to it, because once you start pushing the metallic parts, you can leave fingerprints in there. So make sure they're dry. Leave them for a day or two. There's no rush. There's plenty of other parts to work on. Just take your time. So we've got some Loctite CA glue. I've started using this super glue now. I've been using it for quite a while, and I'm really liking it. It's nice and controllable in the bottle. Again, make sure you haven't got any of your fingers before you start handling parts. Apply it to the bottom of the engine bay, and then we're just going to pop the engine in place. That thing fits in there very snugly. Really does positively locate, so you know when you've got it in. We're then going to get our suspension arms in as well. So a couple of dabs of CA glue either side. There we go. And we can grab it and pop it in place. Make sure we've got it orientated the right way. Pop it in place, push it home, and job done. Again, key to this is making sure everything is assembled correctly. Keep referring to your instructions. Make sure everything's facing the right way. And more importantly, make sure everything is dry. There's nothing worse than pushing a part home. To look down, you've left a massive fingerprint in the parts. So, we've got some Sans Odor from Winsor & Newton. This is an odorless mineral spirit. This is ideal for removing oil or enamel-based products. So, the wash is fully dried. And what we're going to do now is remove any excess. So, we don't remove all the wash, so don't go at it like a madman or madwoman. Just remove the excess, leaving behind the accents in the recessed or raised detail areas. And just take your time. Obviously, we don't want to look overly weathered, but we do also want it to look good as well. So, the wheels were decaled and 2K'd in the last part. And what we're going to do now, we're going to put a little bit of a wash in the centre section. Well, we did put a wash in the centre section, should I say. That's all in there. So what we're going to do now is, we're going to cut them off the sprues. So we're using the other Mist Hobby cutters. These are more of your general cutters. And again, very good quality, nice and sharp. And like I said last time, that nice striking green colour. You're not going to lose these on your bench. And they cut through the parts, no problem at all. Nice high quality tool. We've got our polycaps. Now, Aoshima are the reverse of most other kits. The polycaps go in the wheels. Once we're happy they're in, we can then start assembling the upper parts of the suspension components along with the A-arms, etc. So again, make sure you get everything orientated the correct way. A little bit of CA glue in the locating points. Pop the part in, push it fully home, and just hold it till it's dry. As you see, I didn't have it the right way. See, always pays to pay attention. Using the Mist Hobby tweezers. These are nice tools. I do like these. I've been using them a lot. We're just making sure that the other components, suspension, is two little parts you need to glue on afterwards. They locate in the lower parts as well. Once we're happy with that, we can let that dry and then start putting the other components together. So we assembled the hubs off camera. There's three components. The hub itself, a stud that runs through the centre, and the disc. They were CA glued in place, and then they literally fit in place nice and easy on the A-arms. Just make sure everything's still glued together. We pop the other one in. So basically you can put one lower half in and slightly lift the arm to get the other one in, and that gives us our movable steering. Again, make sure you're going the right way, because in a bit I put the rear discs on backwards and have to remove them because I wasn't paying attention. So we've got a steering rack, I suppose we can call it. That's going to clip in place. Nice and simple, just like that. Just that. And yes, that was a terrible Tommy Cooper impression. Again, using our tweezers just to locate the part fully home. And that will give us our steerable steering. So to this moment, I've realised I put the disc on the wrong side, on the front. Luckily, with them just being freshly glued, the CA glue popped off with relative ease. We swapped sides and got them orientated the correct way. So there we go, glued in place again. No harm, no foul. Silly mistake. Like I say, keep referring back to your instruction book. It's vital for preventing silly mistakes like this. So once we're happy it's all glued in place, get the suspension steering component back on. And there we go. Now we are done on the front. We can move on to the rears. So this is one of the hubs being glued together. So you're going to put a little bit of CA glue around the outer edge. Try and avoid the centre if possible to allow the hub to spin. So just 4 little dabs in strategic places. There we go. Or 5 on this one. Ooh, being generous. We pop our disc in, which has already got the stud in there. Make sure we get the correct one. Just double checking this time. Make sure we're orientated the correct way. There we go. Pop that in. Hold together for a few seconds. Let the CA make its bond. And we're done. Same with the other side. Again, just be careful where you're putting your CA glue. Be aware where it's going, especially if it's going on your fingers or any moving components. And just make sure you're not gluing things together. You shouldn't be. Or like I did before, gluing things the wrong way around. Really liking this Loctite glue in this container. Yes, I know it's just a tube of glue inside, but this applicator makes it perfect, and the lid's really good as well. Literally, I've had this bottle now for about 2-3 weeks. It's nearly empty. I've used it a lot, and the lid's only just started to become problematic. Over time, CA glue builds up on the lids, on the inside and what have you, and they just start to chew up. But this thing's lasted well. Sadly, it's a bit more expensive than the other glues. You only get 3 grams of CA glue for about £3. So it's not the cheapest way of doing it, but if it makes life a little easier for me, I'm happy with that. So again, 4 spots of CA glue and locator points. We got our suspension component in, and then we can put our rear hubs and discs in, ready for putting our wheels in place. So yeah, pretty straightforward assembly. Just pay attention to your instructions. So there we go. There's our wheels on, all in place. Our engine base glued in place. Again, just like we did with the A-arms. Some locator points and a bit of CA glue. They push home, and the wheels push on as well. Engine's looking good. I'm looking forward to coming back next time and cracking on with the interior. So then there we are. That's where we're at. So we've got our engine in, our wheels are on, tyres are on, the suspension's all in. It's very simplistic, the suspension, but the engine's quite good. Quite happy with that to come out. Once you get the interior in and all the bodywork around it, it's really going to tie it together, and it's going to start to look great. So like I say, hopefully we're back with part 3, not too distant future. And we'll concentrate on that interior. Now, it called out for some masking on the interior. I'm going to go a different route. We're going to use probably the tan, saddle coloured leather colour I got, which is up there. I'm just looking out on the shelf. That we plan to use in the Roadster. I'm more than likely to use it on this. I think it'd be a nice contrast between the grey. So we're not going to be masking off the seats. We're just going to do them more than likely that tan leather on the interior. So yeah, like I say, in part 3, we're going to concentrate on that. Part 4, we'll get the body all flatted, sanded, do some of those carbon decals, and then assemble it all and finish it all off. Like I say, I hope to do it in 4 parts. We have to go to 5, it's not the end of the world, but I would like to get it done in 4 and keep it nice and short and concise if possible. So there we go. So thanks for watching today. As always, check out the Scale Model Facebook page and forum. Check out modelemporium.shop for a shop. We very kindly donated the kits and a lot of these tools and paints I've used today. Check out umpretail.com as well. A lot of the paints and tools I've used are also available on there. Check out the Modelling Hangout group for the Off Air Hangouts, live the bench page for our live show information, and check out my Paul ISM Facebook page as well. And also don't forget the Models for Heroes auction on the 1st of March on the Live at the Bench show on the Friday night. We've got loads of kits to auction off, and we'll raise some money for that fantastic charity. So as always, take care. Bye-bye.